Alrighty everyone, welcome back. It is now March 4th of 2023, and with episode 2 of The Mandalorian Season 3 just a couple of days away from now, both John and Dave have been hyping up the fanbase, not just for Mando Season 3, but also for other shows out there like the Ahsoka Tano series and a lot of other shows on the horizon that will be announced, by the way, at Star Wars Celebration that takes place over in London in April next month. That's also going to be a great big deal for fans to tune into. This is Mike Zero. Subscribe if you're new and like this video to see future Star Wars updates. I'm also on Twitter at Mike01. I thank you all so very much for the great and kind support. Now, given that we have a lot of things happening between John, George, and Dave bringing back Star Wars Legends in the mix, really kind of exploring different avenues of the franchise that we have never seen before, not in Legends, not in canon, just also developing brand new original storylines. It's also going to really capture the audience. We also have Jon Favreau, who has been talking a lot more and opening more up about Kathleen Kennedy and his view on how she handled Luke Skywalker and stuff like that. And that's the main subject of today, of what Favreau had to actually say and talk about when it comes to his view of how Kathleen Kennedy handled Luke in the sequel trilogy movies, and especially in The Last Jedi, the middle point of the trilogy at the time. So let's, tap right into all of this, because we do know that Favreau has been more direct and honest with the fans the past couple of months, and especially in the past number of weeks, too. He's even been expressing more about his criticism related to Kathleen Kennedy and the sequel films. So let's, move on forward to the overall subject here and exactly what it really entails and what Favreau actually had to say. Now, with both Disney and Lucasfilm preparing to make big changes behind the scenes at Lucasfilm, creators Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni are beginning to develop various projects that will be announced at next year's Celebration event. Now, in a recent interview with Jon Favreau, however, he went on to talk about Kathleen Kennedy and said a couple of things about her recently that weren't so supportive and positive. Favreau went on to state the following. Well, you see, I thought it was necessary to bring Luke Skywalker back to being the character that focus again, especially in his youth, because to me, when you look at what Kathy did with the previous variation of Luke in the sequels, he was clumsy, looked dirty, and was out of touch with reality. I wanted to bring in a cleaned up version of Luke that mastered his senses and showing fans the height of Luke's power eventually. Kathy's version of Luke in the sequel films to me felt like a flawed version of Skywalker, and it just doesn't work for me. To me, it's all about keeping that Jedi instinct in play and going with the hard and difficult times of battling those emotions that makes a Jedi strong. So I want to just stop here quick of what Favreau is saying. Now, it's funny how he kind of points out how his view of Luke in the sequels is that he's clumsy, he looks dirty, he's out of touch with reality, and to be honest, yeah, that's pretty accurate. I mean, when you look at Luke in The Last Jedi specifically, alright, The Force Awakens was a big exception. That was one of the best endings of all, in my opinion, for a Star Wars film. I thought it was great, it was so iconic, it set things up, it got you excited for the next film. It made waiting 2 years a little bit dreadful, yes, and I think that's also what added up to the big backlash against The Last Jedi, was the suspense, right, of what happened at the very end of Force Awakens, and that mysticism, of Luke, wondering what does he sound like when he talks. You guys remember those days where you always thought to yourself, what does Luke sound like in his older years? Like, what does he sound like when he talks? It was little things like that that really kind of kept that mysticism in play, that, that mystique personality, right? But overall, Favreau has a good point. The fact that he's pointing out that in the sequels, Luke was clumsy, he was out of touch with the reality, he looked dirty, and he actually, really makes good points there, because they're very accurate. When you look at Luke in The Last Jedi, we saw that he couldn't even handle Rey in a sparring session with the staff, or with non-lightsaber, parts, anything like that. He couldn't even take on Rey at that point in time. There's also moments in that film where you do see that Luke's judgment is way off. So I think that Jon Favreau obviously has a great point, and a lot of people will agree. And that's exactly why he said that he wants to provide a more cleaned up version of Luke, a version of Luke that has mastered his instincts and is in touch with reality. What I like about this, and I've said this from the very beginning, is that is the Luke that we always wanted. You know, we always wanted that version of Luke in the sequel movies. So let's, go in further. He goes on to elaborate. When I saw Luke, alright, this is what he says. When I saw Luke in the sequels, I don't know, I barely recognized him as Luke with the beard and the long hair. And as much as I love Hamill, I thought he did a great job acting in those films. He just didn't look like Luke Skywalker to me, and sort of disconnected my link to the character I grew up with as a fan. I used to joke with my friends saying he kind of reminded me of Zach Galifianakis at times. The costume choices, too, in those films I felt were a big underperformance, and that they could have at least gave him a better attire as a Jedi apart from his ceremonial robes. It's my goal now to give fans the Luke that they love and have always wanted to see on screen. And what's funny about this is that I think he kind of has a point there. I know he's just joking here, but I think that I actually thought that to myself at certain shots in The Last Jedi, come to think of it now, that he kind of, yes, looked like a little bit like Zach Galifianakis from the Hangover films in certain shots, especially when Luke is like laying on the ground in front of the Jedi Temple where Chewbacca and Rey are begging Luke to come back. It's in that moment where, yeah, he's got that kind of appearance, but I digress. The thing about Jon Favreau here is basically what he's saying is that, visually speaking, the Luke that we saw in the sequels was very unrecognizable, is what Jon Favreau is trying to get at, alright? He's basically roasting Kathleen Kennedy for really kind of doing everything that she could to make Luke not appear as much like Luke in The Last Jedi. Now, mind you, there's something about Luke in The Force Awakens that felt better. It looked better to me. There was something about it that looked more sleek or more smooth. I don't know what it really was. I think his hair was like straighter or something with the color schemes in the shot. Something about the end of The Force Awakens, if you guys go ahead and look at it, it looks drastically different than Luke's appearance in The Last Jedi. It does. There's something off there. So, anyways, guys, I'm really intrigued to hear what you guys have to say about what Jon Favreau is pointing out here, of how he prefers a more cleaned up version of Luke, like how Luke was in Star Wars Legends, and how we got him in all the books in the 90s and the 2000s, and it may be nitpicking to some people. Some people may say this is nothing but nitpicking and stuff like that, and look, I get it, Jedi, they grow the beards and such, I like that, it's cool, but if you look at the end of The Force Awakens, it worked. To me, it just did not work in The Last Jedi, because they didn't really give him really cool, sleek Jedi attire for the majority of the movie. I think that's also why I kind of felt out of place as well, like Jon Favreau pointed out there. So, overall, guys, fill me in below in the comments, what you guys have to say about all of this, and if you guys did enjoy the content for today, make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel. I thank you all so very much for the kind support, and I'll catch you guys next time.
Gun in hand, we are alone again, no hiding. From night to moon, we hear them moans again, no